So I wanted to talk about something that I know many people are going through at this time. I just wanted to make one quick video about something that's really been on my heart for a while now, for months, This last wave of COVID has been devastating. The first two waves of COVID, it felt like COVID was something from a movie. It felt so far away. It had not hit close to home. I knew a few people who had COVID, but I didn't know anybody who had died from COVID. And so it really didn't carry as much weight as it has now. This third wave has been devastating. This last wave, I know more people who have had COVID and more people who have lost loved ones from COVID than the first two waves combined. And so I wanted to really take a moment to just talk to people who are grieving, who are mourning, and who are struggling to process the loss that they've experienced in this time. This grief feels very different because something about this hour feels like we are grieving in a very corporate way. You can feel the heaviness in the air. You can feel that something unprecedented is taking place. You can feel that there's this mass grief and this mass mourning that is happening globally. And it's something that we haven't experienced in our time. Maybe the closest we came to experiencing this type of corporate grief was when HIV first hit South Africa in the 90s, and everybody was dying from AIDS, and everybody knew somebody who had AIDS or was dying from AIDS. But this is something that we really haven't experienced in our time like this. And so a lot of people are struggling to process their grief. They're struggling to mourn. And I just, I've experienced losing a loved one. At that time, for me, the grief was very personal. It wasn't like how it is now, where there's just this feeling of so much loss in the air. From COVID, from car accidents, we've lost public figures. There's definitely this shaking in the air and this mass feeling of loss and mourning. And having experienced grief in my own personal life, having buried a loved one, having lost a loved one as well, there's just a few things that I really want to encourage people who are mourning to hold on to in this time. It's an incredibly difficult time. And grief, one thing I want people to understand is don't judge yourself for how you are grieving. People grieve differently. There is no one way to grieve. So some people behave stereotypically. They cry, they grieve out loud. They behave in a manner that you would expect a person who is grieving to behave. Other people, have a much more muted way of grieving. Maybe on the outside it looks like they're coping well. Maybe on the outside they appear to be stoic, but emotionally there's a lot of turmoil. However you grieve, people grieve differently, even within a family, and that can cause a lot of tension in a family when people grieve differently. So one thing I want to say is don't judge yourself for how you are grieving. Take it one day at a time. There is no way to grieve. There is no way to cope. There will be bad days. There will be days that feel okay. Just take it as it is. Allow your feelings. Allow them. Another thing I want to say is be very careful about isolating. When you lose your loved one, it's so hard to find your bearings. It's so hard to feel like anything is worth anything anymore. It's like everything loses its gravitas. It's like everything loses its sense of meaning. There's an emptiness. There's a big vacuum. And you have to figure out, now, how do we maneuver with this gap in our lives, with this massive void, right? And it's easy to just want to bury your head in the sand, cover your head with the duvet, and just stay in bed forever. But it's a very dangerous way to handle things. Now, I understand that there'll be days where you just want to be alone to process your pain and to feel it as you see fit. But be very careful about isolation. Reach out to people. Don't be afraid and don't think that you're inconveniencing people. I used to think I was inconveniencing people. I would rather die than ask for help at that time. But it was a mistake to isolate myself the way I did. I absolutely prolonged the grieving process because I almost was in denial and I didn't reach out for assistance. When I needed assistance, I isolated. So don't isolate. Yeah. Also, another thing is, this is a very small thing and it might seem silly, but get moving. Go for walks, go for runs, go to the gym. Anything that moves the body. And don't be still. I know this sounds small and it sounds silly. Like, how can you tell people who are mourning to move as if that's going to do anything? But move your body. Like, you don't understand the psychological benefits of moving your body. Go for a walk, go for a run, get some fresh air, go to a park. Even if you go to a park and just sit there and just sit in the sun, but don't sit in a dark room with the curtains closed, in your bed with the covers over your head for a week, 2 weeks, a month, 3 months. Just be careful about doing that. Be careful about doing that. If you find yourself in that phase, please do reach out. I understand that there will be days where you need to be alone. There will be days where you want to spend all day in bed, and you can do that. It's your pain. You can process it as you see fit. But be careful about isolating for a prolonged period of time. And lastly, but certainly not least, I think it's incredibly important to maintain your faith. The worst thing I did when I was grieving, there was a period of about a year where I just stopped going to church. I couldn't. I was so heartbroken. I didn't realize at the time that I was so mad at God because things were not getting better. And if there's one thing that I wish I hadn't done, is I wish I hadn't turned my back on God in that time, because that was my most self-destructive, most isolated, the darkest period. So if you're a person of faith, don't give up on your faith. Yes, there's a lot happening that we don't understand, but God is sovereign. God is sovereign, and God is faithful. And even if you don't understand what's going on in your life in this moment, even if you don't understand why there is so much pain, so much loss, hold on to the fact that God is sovereign, and He has us in the palm of His hand. And the worst thing you can do when you are in pain, when you are confused, when you are unsure, is to turn away from God. Turn to God with your pain. Give God your pain. What does it look like to give God your pain? Tell God you're mad. Tell God you're sad. And let God heal you. Stay in your word. Go to church. Reach out to your church family. Fast. Pray. Let God in. Don't turn your back on God. So, there's no right way to grieve. Don't judge yourself or your family members for how they grieve. Don't judge yourself or your family members for how they grieve. And be gentle with yourself. Be gentle with yourself. Yeah, that's it. That's all I wanted to say. I'm praying for everybody. I pray every day, not just for myself. I pray for our country. I pray for our leaders. And I know that God is with us, even in the midst of chaos and uncertainty. God is a provider. God is sovereign. And there is a future. There is a future. There is stuff to look forward to. There is hope. There is nothing new under the sun, and the human race has seen tribulation before. So don't give up. Don't be afraid. Don't let fear win. Okay? That's it. Peace out.